us now, and then we're going to start the interview. Where was Alvin's house?
Alvin's house is right up these tracks
Yeah, on Inman Street.
on Inman Street. And I'll tell you an interesting kind of coincidence is there's one other well-known person from history that had hypergraphia, and that was what Virginia Ridley had. In addition to her temporal lobe epilepsy, she had this condition called hypergraphia, which compelled her to write almost every day. It didn't affect what she wrote, it was what she was thinking, but it pushed her, compelled her to write. The other person, most famous person to have hypergraphia is a man out of New York named Inman. And that's the street that they lived on. And that was he wrote and published, because he was wealthy and could publish it, his diaries. Nobody really enjoys reading them, but there they are. So I found 2 volumes of them, and I just got them for the historical purposes. But you want to add something to that?
The same manufacturer used to be in St. Louis. Alvin was in charge of it. And I was running around in my vehicle. I pulled in there. He gave me that second dealership. I started selling.
He gave you Mr. Alverson gave you a Zenith dealership, right? Hollis Alverson. And if anybody knows his family, Alvin is still very appreciative of that. Now,
Let me ask you this question. How many of you had a Zenith television? How many of you took it to Alvin's store to have it fixed?
well, actually, Alvin came to you
Alvin came to you.
because these were like pieces of furniture.
I sat with a man back there in the white hat. He went to high school with Alvin.
Oh, who is?
No, with you, Ken.
Oh,
He went
okay.
to high school with you.
Oh, yeah, I recognize that guy.
Remember him? Hey, can y'all hear Alvin okay or no? Can they turn the air? Would that be bad if you turn the air off?
Somebody's
Oh,
messing
bumping
with
it
the
up. Okay.
microphone.
What's that?
Somebody's trying to adjust.
Yeah,
the
he's back there.
microphone.
He's back there.
I'll turn the sound off as much as I can.
All right.
All right.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to start off with this. I'll set the scene for you. In October 1997, the town of Ringgold in northwest Georgia was shaken by reports of a murder in its midst. A dead woman was found in Alvin Ridley's house. And even more shockingly, she was the wife that no one knew he had. And that's where it all started. Kraken, this man sitting next to you brought you a new life after one ended for you. What happened?
Well, and by that you're meaning my professional life.
I didn't want to say political life. The political career came to an end.
And trust me, I've forgiven all of you when I'm voting for you. Because it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I had heard about Virginia being dead, and I didn't know there was a Virginia. And I think some of the older people in town knew that he got married. But Alvin had spent a number of years denying her presence to people.
She didn't go anymore. She's made somebody say I have a seizure. She'd have me take her to Cleveland, Tennessee, to the steakhouse. I bought her a steak every night.
Okay, so she would slip out the door across the state line every now and then.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I wanted to ask about, Virginia obviously had a falling out with her family, and she wrote about it, right?
Right.
Now, it was a pretty significant falling out. Y'all as a young married couple lived in the new public housing on Circle Drive. Anybody know where Circle Drive here is in Ringgold? It's the Ringgold Housing Authority units, and they were brand new back then, and you were a new tenant of a 2-bedroom apartment. Is that right?
Yeah.
So something happened with the exterminator coming in while your wife was in the bathroom taking a bath. Is that right? Tell folks what happened.
He asked her for a date.
So instead of getting angry and trying to beat this guy up, you just simply removed your wife from public housing on the days you thought he was going to run. Is that right?
Yeah, I gave him mother's house. I took her there.
Well, you took her to a number of places, because since the book came out, I've had a few people offering up that you took her to their aunt's house or somebody else's house to hide her away until the exterminator got through, right?
Yeah, I did.
All right. Then in 1970, well, about 1968, 69, her parents started putting articles in the paper saying that she was missing. Did they not?
Yeah, they did that, but she wasn't missing. She was with me.
What did she think about, because I saw the articles in her stuff in your house, what did she think about her picture being on the paper and her parents saying she was missing?
She didn't like it.
So 1970 happens and you get an eviction notice from public housing, is that right?
Yep.
And this guy's a great interview.
It's radio gold, buddy.
It's called Leading the Witness.
It's the best. There's nothing better than one-word answers.
So you fought this eviction and demanded a jury trial, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I didn't like that manager of that housing lot.
Well, we're not going to talk bad about it. His grandchildren may be here. But in their defense, Alvin used to prank call this guy in the middle of the night when he was a teenager, didn't you not?
12 o'clock in the morning, so
And his wife happened to be the head of the draft board, wasn't she? And you ended up in the U.S. Army, did you not?
she trapped me.
So are you really appreciative of them now because she drafted you? You didn't like it then, did you?
Yeah, I did a VA pension.
You get a VA benefits and Army benefits. Great. So,
Hey,
When I got it, she had a draft me.
and she wouldn't have drafted you if you hadn't prank called at 2 a.m. in the morning.
I sure wasn't going to join on her.
But you're awful proud of it now, aren't you?
so let me ask you, Virginia, she never wanted to leave the house?
Well, occasionally we go eat. I'd have to take her to Cleveland, Tennessee, the steakhouse. She wouldn't eat nowhere in Ringgold.
What was she like? Tell us what Virginia was like. I mean, she was a beautiful writer. She seemed so smart.
She was sweet and lovely.
The picture on the front, if you could just look at the front cover, it says it all right there. I mean, it's like time stood still. It was a beautiful love affair.
You know, we was married to happy 31 years, and she passed away. That was really good. Very close to got me her,
Hey, Alvin, when you found out that they wanted to charge you with the crime of murder, 31 years, look at the picture on the front cover of that book. Murder. What happened to you? What did you think about immediately?
Well, when I said before the jury, I tried the real tears come down my eyes. Because I lost my life because they falsely charged me murder. The jury went to jail and come back and said, well, I'm very acquitted, not guilty. This guy was retarded.
I will say this, Jed. The whole case, Alvin and Virginia were so consumed with people looking for her that it started to affect a number of things about their life. For one thing, the authorities looking after the elderly started coming and looking after his mother and wanting to talk with his mother. Is that right?
Right.
And I showed you after I found all of your papers in the house that you and your mother kind of caused that. Do you realize that now?
Yeah.
His mother wrote, or somebody wrote, and his mother signed a letter appealing to them for help because your father had died. Is that right?
Right.
And she said he promised her a new refrigerator and 2 new dresses. Is that right?
That's right.
And so when social services started coming out trying to investigate y'all, you thought it was Virginia's family causing it, didn't you?
Yeah.
So you escaped with your mother to Erlanger Hospital, didn't you?
Yeah, I got her out of jurisdiction of Cusey County. They couldn't mess with her. I put her to her in the hospital.
Okay.
And the doctor at the hospital and the nurse in charge told me, when you take your mother back home, you have any trouble, anything, call us in a meeting.
So they examined her and evaluated her and found she was of sound mind and she wanted to be with her son at home. Is that right?
Right.
But you gave him quite a bit of hell, didn't you?
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you this question. The infamous van.
Oh, Lord.
Is that... You still have the van?
The van's still up there untouched.
Stop. Is it really?
It's been there several years. Always getting a new man.
You did have some difficulty with some of the political leaders of Catoosa County. It's been some problems when you own the store.
But then you took that van around the corridors side by the judge. I didn't accept it back, although it gave me a brand new Dodge van 2 years ago.
All right, to set the record straight. Alvin started litigation about his father's fender bender. His father died 2 years later of pancreatic cancer, and the way Alvin and his mother thought that must have been related to that fender bender. And so he files a lawsuit, started off with a lawyer, ended up representing himself. The lawsuit got counterclaims, and one of the counterclaims prevailed, or they thought they did, and they took a FIFA, or an assessment, an attachment to an asset of his, and that was a 1977 Chevy van. The article was posted in the legal notes of the paper that they were going to seize it. They did seize it. A young deputy by the name of L.C. Cripps was the unlucky guy that pulled it away, but he was just, as I explained to Alvin, he was just picking up work off the desk at the sheriff's department and going and doing it. Alvin got the van back in 3 weeks, but it has sat untouched for now 40 years this year. There are trees growing up on either side of it. Alvin explained to me that if he touches it, it begins a whole new statute of limitations, and he's just wanting to leave it be right now. So Alvin's legal world was something else I had to learn. And it was like an extra level of law school, learning how things happen in Alvin's legal world. And you corrected me on a few things, did you not?
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. So, you came back to your hometown, McCracken.
I never left.
You never left, but you were said, you know what? This is what I need to be doing. I need to be practicing law full time. You heard that story. What happened?
Well, my dad was close friends with Alvin Ridley. My dad, if many of you may have known him, he had a lot of problems, a big problem, but he was a wonderful man. was a sweet, kind man. And he always had kindness for people that worked at Wheeling Foundry who may have been not in the strongest positions in society. And I've had a number of men tell me that Wheeling had a strict, you're fired if you're sleeping on the job policy. And a couple of these guys were working 2 jobs. It's a cold winter outside, that foundry is very warm, and they would drift off to sleep. And they said my dad would always show up, tell them, I'll watch this for a while, you go get you some coffee. He never executed the firing policy that Wheeling had.
So he was a superintendent.
Yes. And my dad liked Alvin. Alvin went to school with my oldest sister, Bunny, Mary, that we call her Bunny. And Alvin, but I was born there senior year, so I didn't really know him. But my dad liked to deal with him. And he bought a big console Zenith TV set that I stripped the tuner knob right off. 3912, all of you have been there. It was just a crescent pin on a plastic knob, and I just wore out that plastic knob so that it would just spin and fall off. So I was doing fine with a pair of pliers, turning the channels. But my mother waves this guy in from the garden, and I'm watching Harry Thornton live wrestling. And suddenly there's this strange man behind me holding a TV tuner knob and gives me about a 20-minute lecture on how to turn a TV tuner. He then told me something, and this is the only reason I remember this. He told me that he met a famous wrestler. You want to tell them who you met behind the Memorial Auditorium?
He was a main guy.
Oh, he was the big guy.
Under the giant.
Who?
Andre the Giant. And
He talked to me about 15 minutes. I asked him what to eat. He said 12 eggs and 7 boys. You're wrong for bread.
so he's telling me about 13, this story, and I was awestruck because here's a guy who met Andre the Giant and knows what he has for breakfast every morning. I went and told all of my friends at school. So I completely forget this until I'm representing this guy for murder, and he just pipes up, I met Andre the Giant. He eats this, that. And I thought, you're him. You're the guy that gave me the lecture about the TV tuner knob. So I was somewhat aware about it, as everybody was, but I was from Graysville. I didn't know who all your eccentrics were down here. My friends Doug Baxter and Clay Tucker and Curtis Barger, they gave me the tour of Ringgold. And they told me, here's, a lot of you will remember some of these names, but here's Gigi, or Giggy, they called him, I think. There was, of course, later in years, John Howard, whose family is a great family here. But John, as his sister told me, he was kicked in the head by a mule as a child. And John was affected by that injury. And one day I'm at the Capitol, I'm in the State House, and I get a call from my secretary. The way a little page brought me the note that said, your secretary needs to talk to you. And she said, you have a visitor from Ringgold over here at the Legislative Office Building. And I said, who? She said, John Howard. Well, I thought it was somebody playing a joke on me. The time I ran over there, he left. I lost a constituent. And I didn't know how he got there. I knew he didn't have anybody with him. He actually told me that he got there over the phone before he disappeared. But when I finally got him the next morning, 5 agencies for the state government looked for him all night. And when I finally got him and took him to breakfast, I said, why did you come to the Capitol? And he said, I get a check every month, and Alvin Ridley cashes it for me, and he takes 15%. So I told him, John Howard, go to the bank, get a bank account. They will give you 100% of your money. And he said, I knew you and the governor would figure out what to do. So I confronted Alvin Ridley the next time I was home. And I said, Mr. Ridley, don't cash Mr. Howard's checks anymore. And he just stared a hole through me. He didn't smile then. I think a lot of Alvin's things that can be explained by a later diagnosis that Alvin had just 3 years ago. One of the jurors in the case, Kimberly Clark Barnes, reached out through a podcaster who was interviewing her about this case. And she had become a nurse in Alaska. And she said, have you ever thought that Alvin may have autism? Well, I have never thought that because nobody talked about autism in adults 30 years ago, 25 years ago even. We just had some eccentric people and people who did march to a beat of a different drummer. But the idea set my mind in motion because I knew younger people who had autism. And I knew some of the characteristics and traits. It's a processing issue. And I asked Alvin, I said, would you let me take you to Atlanta to be evaluated? And we'll go have lunch down there for autism. And I think you said maybe you'll get some more VA benefits if we...
Yeah, that's right.
So I took him, and he is very much on the autistic spectrum, which, with his permission, I began to tell you in the community through my Facebook posts and through and to me, it finally formed the book in my head. The book I'd been wanting to write for 25 years almost. It finally made me realize there is my call to action, that there should be more and better testing for autism, because there's 5.5 million people. There's 5.5 million people in the country that are walking around undiagnosed. They are having encounters with law enforcement, and it's a processing issue both ways. Alvin has processing issues from things I say, especially if I don't speak very literally. But I was having processing issues in trying to understand him. So nobody is better than the other. It's just that we couldn't understand each other. And we fought like crazy.
Ken, at another school, I won't mention the name of the school, but you hid me behind the bleachers. And your secretary, I won't call her name, come and got me out, escorted me out there in front of the crowd. And I told the crowd, I said, this woman here is not stood up, and she's escorted me out here. I won't lie and clap the hand.
And I don't see you're hanging up on the fact that people were scared of you. Well, that was their problem.
Hey,
That wasn't your problem. That was their problem.
all right, I'm going to get back to this, but it's still in my mind. You got to fast forward it to his meeting that woman and saying, introducing himself.
Yeah, how did you meet Virginia?
Through a girlfriend I had that Westwood, had a picture of her. She showed me a picture. I got her phone number and called her. House 11 o'clock at night.
Hey, when you walked into that house, were her writings all over the walls? When you walked,
You're talking about when he met Virginia?
no, when her writings were wonderful.
First place, this guy would not let me in his house for
Right.
over a year.
You are right. You had
And it was the kindness of my parents that broke this case wide open. They said, we want you to take Alvin Ridley a turkey plate. And I did not want to take it. I was 5 weeks away from trial. We had very little to go on. I had obtained the Olympic track star Florence Griffith Joyner's autopsy. And it was very similar to Virginia Ridley's autopsy. So I knew at least I had the argument that here is a famous person who had a first-class autopsy, and they're saying that's seizure death. And we've got the least known woman in the world who has a autopsy that looks a lot like her in terms of where the hemorrhages were. So I was so frustrated, I couldn't stand it. And that turkey plate opened up his home. Alvin, I learned, was very transactional. And if you gave Alvin something, he wanted to give you something back. And that's all he had to give was access to his house. I tried for a year to get in. I think Kevin Hill, is he still with the phone company? Y'all know who I'm talking about? I got it to where I was going to put a phone back in Alvin's house. And I planned it out to where I'll get Kevin Hill to be the installer, and I'll go with him, and I'll get in Alvin's house, and I'll be able to take all these pictures.
Yeah, because when you picked him up every day, we go to breakfast or whatever, he would be waiting for you outside. You could not enter that house.
Would not let me inside. So I show up with Kevin, and Alvin decides to have the phone installed on the porch.
Okay, so you walked inside with that turkey plate.
Walked inside with the turkey
What did you
plate.
see?
A very dark room. It was late in the afternoon. It was winter-ish, and there were blankets kind of insulating the windows. I'd seen pictures of the house from the investigation. I'd seen the deathbed. And when my eyes finally focused, it was on a wall that was just full of writing. And it was attached every way, tacked, nailed, taped, just every way you could attach it. Oh, here goes. This is what we do in Graceville too. We sit quietly while the train goes by. That was fast. It's comforting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I began to see these writings, but my eyes still couldn't adjust. My big head was creating a shadow, so I was having to get kind of sideways and try to read it from a distance. It was all different things, poems, recipes, a journal, talking about what was going on in town, talking about things on the news, the cast of the Waltons TV show.
Yes.
All in the most beautiful handwriting with a very fancy flourish on the lower reaches of the letters. And my heart jumped a little bit because I really wanted there to be some evidence of this woman having a regular life. And this was a very regular life. And I said, Alvin, who wrote this? He said, Virginia did. And I'm putting it up on the wall because it's all I got left of her. And I said, Alvin, I gotta have this. And he said, you can't. That's all I got left of her.
That's right.
All right, so then he allowed you to take some of the writings.
No, we had to go through an ordeal of prayer, and I had to give him $200.
And he had to cash your check.
Cash.
Hey, McCracken, you've got, when you read this book, I'm going to tell you people that the character development you have is outstanding. To the point where, you know what, you get to know even the ambulance person who checks the body. I mean, it's just, you get close to every single person that you've encountered. It's a real gift you have.
Well, let me tell you that, and this is what time helped me with in writing this book. There was not a person acting with bad intent in this story at all. And Alvin has forgiven his accusers. Have you not?
Forgive everybody that done me wrong.
Well, why do you think forgiveness is important?
You can't go to heaven.
Without forgiveness, right?
Right. You got to forgive everybody that done you wrong.
And Alvin was very wound up about a lot of things, and they all seemed to converge around the time this van was taken. And that was the kind of the downfall. And he used to post inside, y'all remember inside of his shop, he would type out these long things and tape them up on the inside so you couldn't take them down. And he'd be really trash talking a bunch of officials, but he was saying, because they ruined my business, I'm out of business. I want to get things going back again. You're retired now, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you admit now that maybe solid state circuitry had a little bit to do with the downfall of your business?
They quit making TVs, went to solid state, big screen.
Big flat screens? What do you do when they start to break down? What do you do?
Throw it away and go get another.
The question I was asking you about, I think, is after the trial was over and he was found innocent, and you went to the restaurant. And
Okay.
That's what I was talking
All right.
about when he introduced himself.
Well, if you hadn't gotten to the end of the book yet.
For a new life.
We're going to spoil a little of it. But all the time I was representing Alvin, I was trying to kind of get him to where he could operate in my world a little better. And instead of just staring a hole through people when he encountered them, I wanted to teach him how to speak first, and just, it's kind of a social custom to. Now, he was very good around women. I think his mama raised him right. When he would be screaming at me in my office, if my secretary or intern would walk through, he would just get completely quiet and actually become charming. And then when they'd leave, he'd start screaming at me. And that was when the time that I just was so exasperated, and I hear the van again, and I can't get him to talk about his poor dead wife and the fact that he's being charged with her murder. And I would say, Alvin, you've got to talk about the murder case, and we got to quit talking about the van. And he said, but I didn't kill her, but they did take my van. So in his logic, we need to be addressing this injustice. And I had to work around that, but at one point, I was so exasperated, I just was here, I heard the word van, and I went, oh Lord. Well, Alvin fell silent. He thought I was praying. And he began to let me continue that prayer, which was basically the legal advice for the next 15 months. But I will tell you that when we are in that courtroom waiting on the jury, I was really praying.
Alvin, what is that feeling like? I can't imagine. I watch movies, you watch television shows, just the waiting, and they say the jury has a decision.
And I said before the jury, I was crying because I lost my wife. She died with a seizure. And I was crying because the folks in charge me morning. Tears is coming out of my eyes. The jury seen them. Jerry went to the jury room. He's gone about an hour and a half. Come back. Said, Alvin Ridley not guilty.
Hey, McCracken, did you cry?
Listen, when I saw my father there at the trial and in very good shape, that was a very emotional moment for me. And when I was writing this book, the Chattanooga Times threw away all its negatives. I mean, what a treasure that is gone. They threw them away. The Free Press, their negatives went to the UTC library. But a new paper merged 1 week before our trial, and it was the Chattanooga Times Free Press. They still had their photo archives at the Hamilton County Library. And when I learned that, I thought, there's actual trial photos, because the Rule 22 was applied and they allowed a photographer into the courtroom. And so I went to the Chattanooga Library and had a loop where I could hold up negatives and look, and I would instantly recognize, there's Alvin in his neck brace, there's Alvin without his neck brace.
There are Did they ever get pictures of the, you know what, all over the courtroom?
No close-ups were allowed, but.
So we're talking about insects, correct?
Right. Alvin had a bit of, when Virginia passed, I think Alvin had some trouble with cockroaches in your house. Is that right?
Orchid man do that. When orchid sprayed, I sprayed all over the house.
You didn't get an endorsement from them to do that, did you?
They all didn't know I paid for it.
Well, the problem is, any of you remember Salesman Sam? This is a good time to bring that up. Salesman Sam was an itinerant salesman who rode around on a little bicycle with a basket on the front. He had a full gray beard, and he sold items out of catalogs. He basically was a middleman. And he would bring his catalog to you, and you'd pick out things. Well, Salesman Sam was countering my legal advice and giving Alvin alternate legal advice that caused him to get arrested in Rome, Georgia.
You're arrested.
You got detained.
Yeah. And you called and told the guy I was innocent. And I said, okay.
And that was the best when you wrote about, it's like, stop taking legal advice from Salesman Sam. Let me handle this.
So I decided to just tear into Salesman Sam. So I went down to his home in Tunnel Hill. And I didn't tell him that I got Alvin out of trouble. I just said, your advice caused Alvin to get arrested in Rome today. And his eyes kind of got big. And I said, and where's your bar card? And he said, son, I've been giving legal advice to Alvin Ridley since before you were around. So I felt the need to kind of make up with Salesman Sam. So I decided I'm going to order some stuff from him. And that way maybe we'll get a new start, a fresh start. So I ordered Alvin a couple of pairs of shoes from him. Did you ever get them? Okay. And then I ordered some promotional pins for my law office. And I got a bunch of them. And let me tell you, the minute I got them, they had my office name and my number on them. And I even got a little thing for Salesman Sam to advertise his business on it. It says, McCracken Poston, lawyer, Ringgold, Georgia, and there's my number, and then it says, Salesman Sam Advertising, Tunnel Hill, Georgia. And I bought these from him, and I got about 500. And they came to my office, and I got one out, took the cap off, dry as a bone. I think he got them, I think they might have been 10 years old when he had them printed for me. So now they're over 25 years old, they're still dry as a bone, and for everybody that gets a book tonight, you're getting one.
Hey, did you buy the briefcase that Alvin would bring into court, and he would open it up and some roaches would scatter?
The problem was, I had Virginia's writings completely categorized in the way I needed them to be able to find them in court. Alvin and Salesman Sam, or do you want to blame him? Alvin and Salesman Sam would get it all out, reshuffle it, and I couldn't find anything. They also somehow left something in there that attracted scores of roaches who would get in those briefcases, and then you'd close them up. The next morning, we would unleash them in the courtroom. Judge Van Pelt's office was right next to the courtroom, so he started realizing they're infesting the annex. And about the third day of the trial, I think it was third day, Alvin, the judge said, we're going to move to the large courtroom because I have to fumigate this. But let me tell you, talking about the Lord working in mysterious ways, we moved to the old courtroom in the old part of the courthouse, built in 1939. Big, airy, beautiful courtroom. The last place Virginia Ridley was ever seen in public in Ringgold, Georgia. And now we were taking her writings into that courtroom. I'm not a real ghost fan. I don't really follow these shows where people are trying to find ghosts. But I felt very strongly that Virginia was in that room looking after you, Alvin. What did you think?
It was.
I'm going to bring up another. I'm scattered because I just cannot believe I'm sitting here. I get to meet Alvin Ridley. When you take us through the witnesses, the people that you had done the research on, the experts, and is there any way you could just somehow shorten the disappointment of the one forensic person that testified for you, and you're like, we're not going to win this trial? This is horrible.
Alvin was a horrible client. He would fight me at every turn. But the internet was new, and I was kind of wanting to show off the internet to Alvin Ridley. So I would sit him at my big old PC with a giant monitor, 1998, and I would turn it on and show him, here's how we're going to research your case. And I was doing like medical digest abstracts, looking up sudden death and epilepsy. And I kept finding this one name of this doctor who was in all the research, and his name was Braxton Bryant Wanamaker. And the best I could find, he was in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and I was on the phone with him the next day and begged him to be an expert witness about epilepsy, about the petechial hemorrhages that both Virginia Ridley and Florence Griffith Joyner had after their seizure deaths. And this was going to be our star. But Alvin liked this guy on the internet that had music on his website and a little animation. And he was a forensic pathologist in Georgia. And so Alvin and Virginia loved these shows. Like back then it was Unsolved Mysteries, right? Virginia wrote a proposed script for Unsolved Mysteries. You know what it was about? Alvin's daddy's car wreck and the taking of their van. So they didn't do that one. So I'm thinking this is the most engaged I've ever seen Alvin about this case. He really wants this forensic pathologist, but every time I would say that phrase, I would have to spell it for him. So I spelled forensic pathologist. Alvin used to carry a big pack of paper in his pocket, and he whipped that paper out, and again and again, but with every time, Alvin's excitement grew for this guy. Couldn't afford to have him come up and hang out with us a lot, but I had him come up the night before, and Alvin and I took him to Red Lobster. Is that right? So Alvin is so excited. He says, isn't the doctor coming to my house? And I thought, well, sure, I guess. I didn't know what to expect. But the good doctor was afraid of Alvin. And he was a big guy, big bear of a guy. He had his shirt tail was out when we picked him up at what is the one on the corner across the street from Kentucky Fried Chicken. I put Dr. Wanamaker up in a nicer hotel, but I put this guy up in that place, right across from Walter Jackson's place. Anyway, Super 8. That was it. And no offense to Super 8 if you're here. So he gets in the car and he pulls his shirt back to show me that he's armed. And he's like, don't worry, I've got us covered. And I was looking at him like, it's okay, it's not the problem. Alvin, who had given up the front seat, was leaning up saying, when are we going to my house? So we went to Red Lobster and he got some meal, and this guy's a real sweet guy when it comes to animals. And he said, can I take some back for my cats? That's another story. But he was excited. We show up to the house. Goldberg stayed in the house probably 2 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah.
He did not like it in that house. Well, Alvin sees his gun, and Alvin pulls out his own gun. And it's like it had a dirt dauber nest up in its barrel. At least in one of the chambers that had a dirt dog in it. I thought this thing's going to explode if anybody pulls the trigger. You scared Dr. Goldberg? All right. He ran flying out of the house once you pulled your gun out. And I was the only unarmed man anywhere. Well, I stayed around with Alvin. I didn't want Alvin's feelings to be hurt. All of a sudden, I just was feeling more empathy for Alvin. And I said, you know, what Alvin did a few days before, a woman who works at Waffle House now, she was interviewed by the newspaper, and she said, I remember when Alvin used to drive around town with a mannequin in the car, trying to make us think he had a girlfriend. Comments?
Yes, sir.
So I thought, when are they going to leave this poor guy alone? They're talking about driving around with a mannequin in his car. So we go up to Dr. Goldberg, we get him up the steps, and we get him in the house. And Alvin said, I've got it all ready for you. And there's the mannequin. Playing the role of Virginia, along with a closer view styrofoam wig head with a wig on it, showing how Virginia was positioned at her time of death. And I thought it was a pretty neat non-crime scene. Dr. Goldberg was kind of freaked out about it. And I said, Alvin, is this the mannequin that they were talking about in the newspaper last week? And you remember what you told me?
Yeah.
Alvin said, yeah, that reminded me that I had that down in the basement. So Alvin would be upset about the press coverage. No offense to any of you in the media, but something that Virginia did that I think Alvin thought about doing was, and I think a lot of it was reverse engineered, but when somebody was mean to Alvin, a lot of times they died, and Alvin thought that maybe him giving them up to the Lord is what caused them to die.
All the people died on Calvin.
Well, obviously, I told you that don't you feel bad about giving people up to the Lord and then they die? And Alvin told me the Lord has his own reasons for taking them out. And again, I think I've never known Alvin to do that himself. I think it was reverse engineered. That person was mean to me, so I gave it up to the Lord. I was just hoping not to be given up to the Lord during the representation.
Don't turn me over, Lord.
That's right. Don't turn me over, the Lord was my plea. So Alvin just had a unique way of looking at things, and it was really kind of interesting.
And yeah, I mean, you got to read the book to understand what's going to happen to this doctor, and just you're just going to go, oh gosh, this is the worst thing that ever happened to this poor Mr. Ridley. You've got to read this. You're going to be.
And we went from the lows of that to during lunch, where Alvin and Salesman Sam and a couple of people from Alvin's new church were tagging along. So I just said, why don't you guys sit together? I'll sit over here. I'll pay for your lunch. But just, I need some time to think of what just happened this morning. It was a very low point in our case.
If you're an animal lover, it plays a big part in this. It's you can always tell how good a person is by how they treat animals. So you're reading about Alvin's love of animals here, and it's like, he didn't do it. He couldn't have done this.
Well, and that's when Jesus showed up at lunch and told Alvin he had to testify.
Yes.
Our plan all along
Was it the Hardys?
No, this was in Trackside.
Oh, Trackside.
Trackside. It used to be. Now it's then it was Don Lolo's, and now it's Raphael's, I think, which used to be the Ringo Theater that Alvin was talking about earlier. So what happened was I had convinced Alvin that a jury was not going to take it well if I'm asking questions about his wife and he wants to talk about the van. And he kind of got it for the longest time. He tolerated my theory of what jurors wanted to hear. But Jesus appeared to him in his heart and told him to testify. Do you want to describe that?
He did.
Well, now that was Alvin's right. I could make most decisions in the case as lawyer, but that is a person's individual right, whether they testify or they not testify. And it was always going to be Alvin's decision. But Renzo Wiggins, who had just seen my cross-examination of Dr. Hellman, the state pathologist, he had a case with Dr. Hellman, so he was over there taking very, very good notes. And he said, I'm gonna give you my notes to use for cross-examination. I said, great. He said, I think you are doing great. Just keep Alvin off the stand. And I said, yeah, that's the plan, man. But Alvin and Jesus had other plans, didn't they? So, would you like some water?
When I did, I was going to Rome, Georgia to talk to a federal judge about the county taking my van. Well, the court order signed by the judge. There's a U.S. Marshal standing there. And on my way down there to the vehicle, I went, the gas line leaked, and I repaired it back. And her 18-wheeler gave me a line. I replaced it. And when I got down to Rome, Georgia, the U.S. Marshal was standing there. He smelled their gasoline all over. He was about to arrest me. And Ken Poston called and told him I was okay.
Now, I think you're fibbing a little bit because the U.S. Marshal said you were complaining about your lawyer.
I did.
All right. I know they want to ask questions, but real quickly, the cats, that plays a big part in this.
Yeah, there were two reports, one in 1993 and one in 1997. The first one was social services coming to check on his mother. The 1997 was the coroner coming in to get his wife's body. And they both noted, oddly, by completely different sources, there are two cats tied to the coffee table. So when I went in the house, and when Alvin, before he let me in the house, he went in, I heard him talking. And when my eyes adjusted and I saw her writings, I looked down and there's two cats looking up at me and they're just patiently sitting, but they're tied to the coffee table. And I said, Alvin, if any of my sisters get on this jury, you're a dead man. Because the DA is going to say you're being cruel to these animals. And Alvin said, I only tie them when people are coming in and out the door, or if I'm hauling stuff in or out. And they were very willingly, they've been trained to sit there. But nevertheless, I said, we have got to get these cats to the vet. Because if I have a vet witness, it's gonna make it to where I can maybe keep the whole cat evidence out, because the state decided they were going to bring the cat evidence in. And so the last day that I could add a witness, y'all know Millie Cheek? Millie Cheek, her daughter Elizabeth was my intern. It's a high school student. And Alvin comes in saying, well, ain't we taking the cats to the vet? And it was the last day I could add witnesses. And so I said, Elizabeth, get a couple of boxes, packers boxes for files. And Alvin, I know how you are. You're going to control these cats the whole way. I'll pay the bill. We just got to get these cats to the vet. So we rush over to his house, and I realized on the way over there that I'm taking this high school student to an accused murderer's house. And I know and love Millie, but I'm not sure if she and Glenn were going to be really okay with that. And so I said, Elizabeth, why don't you stay out? Why don't you build these boxes out? And we had some kind of something to keep the lids on. And I said, I gave Alvin a box. And I said, go in and get one cat and come out. And I said, Alvin, before we get to the vet, these cats better have names. Now, I want to know, because I've never asked you this. Did you name them on the spot, or did they already have names?
What were they? You remember?
So Alvin comes to the door and he says, "This is Meowie." Mama named her Meowie. So we put Meowie's box in the car. I give him another box, but I try to follow him in. This is after I've been in the house and I have access to the house. But I tried to follow him in because I think I see something under the sofa in the porch. And a giant gopher rat comes out.
Oh.
And I think I screamed a little bit. And Elizabeth screamed a little bit when I came running out of the house, probably thought he was killing me. And we all had a laugh. And then Alvin comes to the door with the other box and says, "This is Kitty." Mama named her Kitty. So we took Kitty and Meowie over to the vet. We open up Meowie. The vet says, "Oh, it's a calico. How old is this cat?" Alvin said, "This was late 1998. This is the last days of 1998. And Alvin said, "Mama got her in 1990. I thought, well, and the vet said, "That's about right." And I'm saying, "Check the neck." She's fluffing she says, "Well, she's got ear mites, but I could treat that. Otherwise, this cat's a very healthy cat, and there's no markings around the neck, no excessive tying of this cat up." So Alvin points to the other box on the floor and says, "Mama got Kitty in 1977. And I said, "No way, Alvin. That was when I was in high school. Mama saved her from a shotgun death, 1977. He insisted. And so we opened this box, and I was freaked out because I had never seen a 22-year-old cat before. Its fangs had grown down below its chin. It looked a little cross-eyed, but that's a thing, that there are cross-eyed cats. And it just freaked me out. And I did not want freaking. And the vet said, "Mr. Poston, this cat's fine. She's just an extremely old animal." And I said, "Check the net." And she said, "You took very good care of those animals. Do you miss those Kitty and Meowie?"
Yeah, I do.
Did you keep calling them those names after I made you name those cats?
Yeah, I did.
All right, let's raise your hand. I don't know, where's the sound person? Okay.
If you have a question, we're coming around with white note cards.
Oh,
And
sure.
he already has, Will sitting up there has the questions so
Oh.
far.
Reviewing and rating the book. That is the mother's milk of publishing, is good reviews, because it just expands the horizons of the book. When people deciding what they're going to read, they say, "Oh, look at these reviews."
Before I get to a question, will a movie be made?
There was a movie deal in 2004 that Alvin and I participated in, and the company kind of went under. It was New Line Cinema.
What?
They went under, and then they got reconstituted, and none of the new folks liked any of the decisions of the old folks. So I retained literary rights from that deal, and retained the rights to call my book Zenith Man. Then somebody else wrote a book called Zenith Man about this case.
Wow.
Totally fiction. And I've been giving the story away to every TV show that ever came around. Alvin enjoyed doing those. But I just asked that author, please at least say that this was inspired by real events and not sprung from your mind. And ultimately they did do that, but lately she's been giving her book away for free. But it's the one right next to ours when you look up Amazon. And it's just set in a different place with different names, but it's a TV repairman with a wife nobody's seen for 30 years. What do you think?
Wow.
So either way, it's okay, because she got me off my butt and on my butt, because I knew something very important to me was being taken away. And so I wanted to tell Alvin's story from my perspective, and I hope I did it justice. I was true to the story. you know, the conversations, it was easy, the conversations Alvin and I had, because we had the same conversation every day for 15 months. The van, later, the wife, her family. What else did we talk about?
Well, then I went down alone to tell them about that van the county took.
Once again, you went down the road to complain about your lawyer, and it's okay.
U.S. Marshal stopped me. That's when a vehicle leaked gas in the car with a line I had repaired. He thought I was trying to go in the courthouse and burn it down. He stopped. You called, told him I was all right.
And let me tell you, that was before 9/11. We all know what would have happened had this happened after 9/11. Alvin would have been over that day.
By the way, here's one reviewer. Like a nonfiction John Grisham thriller with echoes of Rain Man, Just Mercy, and a captivating small-town southern setting, this is the fascinating true story, sometimes humorous, sometimes heartbreaking, of an idealistic young lawyer determined to free an innocent, neurodivergent man accused of murdering the wife who no one knew he had. I'm telling you, you are going to say, this is one of the finest books you've ever read. You should be very proud. This is, McCracken, you've done a great job, and I will continue. So I have to buy a 13th copy, but it's incredible. It's been such an honor to reconnect with you. All right, let's get through these. Why was the jury not allowed to listen to the tape or reread the transcript during deliberations?
Do we have a juror here? Because that is a common thing, that once you hear something in court that's a tape, they do not allow you to rehear it. They tell you to pay attention. The transcript is created to just help you listen to the tape. My secretary created the transcript. As a matter of fact, it was state-created evidence that the defense was introducing, because I felt like it was helpful to Alvin, and the state never introduced it at all. But we had to agree that the transcript that was done by Lori Duckworth was an accurate transcript. And so we had a couple of days of kind of back and forth over whether it was that. The rule is that if they have a transcript that has to be taken up, they can't take it into the jury room. They can't take the tape into the jury room and re-listen to it again. It's just a matter of not putting too much emphasis on one piece of evidence. And so just like a person testifying, you can't take that person back in the jury room and ask them more questions. So it's the same idea.
Okay. Ken, this is the ultimate compliment. Will you be writing another book?
I would love to. I love the process. It was my poor lady here, Jacqueline, probably was more tolerant than she wanted to be of me, but it was
Is that your wife?
This is my girlfriend, Jacqueline.
Jacqueline, you got it. I mean, yeah. I want to ask you about the players.
And let me introduce Carlene,
Where is
my secretary, who for 15 years has been my secretary.
You would give her a clap after you read this book. Trust me. And where's the intern?
Carlene, well, Elizabeth Cheek now works with autistic kids.
Wow. That's a story.
In Murphy, North Carolina.
Okay.
And so Carlene started working for me 15 years ago. Her immediate job before mine was with Lookout Mountain Services, working with developmentally disabled adults. It took me forever to get her to quit calling my files our charts. She would ask, "Do you want their charts?" And I was like, "No, I want my file." But she was the perfect person to help me help Alvin Ridley.
This person.
Don't you think so, Carlene?
Yeah.
Somebody just asked about the movie. There's got to be other questions. Go ahead.
I have a comment. First of all, while you were speaking, I didn't know you were going to go into what you did about this, but I was thinking, I wanted to thank you for having Alvin and
Can you hear back there?
You could kind of not that. But, and also, as a result of the work my son did, he had severe seizure disorder. So this book just pushes all my buttons.
Is this gonna?
Thank you.
So basically, she said she's got a son who has a traumatic brain injury, and she's just so appreciative of having Alvin Ridley here.
Well, I thanked Ken for bringing Alvin's diagnosis of autism forward and discussing it, because it does explain a lot of Alvin's behaviors. And we do have an adult son who has a traumatic brain injury as a result of being hit head-on by a drunk driver 27 years ago. And people with any kind of mental health issues are always usually misunderstood. People are frightened of them. And one of our biggest fears as parents, although our son lives in a facility and he's safe, but one of the things that family members are so afraid of is that their loved one will be arrested or whatever and not be able to communicate or be understood. And I personally have asked several of the, Hamilton County, for example, to speak to their police officers about communicating with people with disabilities like
That's a good
Alvin's.
idea, maybe.
And also, my son has a severe seizure disorder as a result of the blow to his head. So this book just pushes all my buttons. And I love a good character like Alvin.
Is there, thank you. Is there anybody else? Somebody's got a question. Come on. Anybody? Go ahead, stand up, baby.
I talked to a
Hold
fellow.
on.
I talked to a fellow that I think his dad's mentor, Mr. Ridley. He said he told me this morning that when they were little kids playing down close to their house, that her mom, his wife, would not come outside because of the shaking. It was embarrassing. She was embarrassed to play on see her doing the shaking. Is that the reason she stayed in the house?
So who are we talking about?
It's Alvin's wife. He said that she was just embarrassed because of her shaking, that she didn't want to leave the house.
Alvin said a little while ago that she did not like to get out because of her, she was afraid she would have a spell. Is that right?
Very people with friends.
She was afraid people would see her.
Okay.
Now one of, while he's getting the next question, one of the greatest pieces of evidence written by Virginia was on one page, and if I've said this before, I'm talking to a lot of podcasts and I don't know what I've said. One page, it had that she did not like to go out in public, that she has trouble with her family, and that she met with Sheriff Leroy Brown. And that was one page, pretty much dispelled a lot of the accusations of Alvin of keeping her against her will and keeping her away. The allegation that he didn't let her have medicine, she wrote in the Bible, September 1977, God told me to stop taking my medicine. Now, Virginia had reactions sometimes to her medicine. So she decided, God is telling me not to take it anymore. Alvin, thankfully, had years of empty bottles leading up to September, October of 1977, and then months of filled bottles. So he kept getting her the medicine, even for a while, until he realized, okay, she's really not going to take it anymore.
All right, here's another question.
Hi, Ken. I just want to say, Ken, everything that I've seen you do. I see you guys eating lunch over at Caffeine Addicts. I see, the museum little thing that you've got there on the wall that tells Alvin's story. I see how you have helped Alvin to integrate back into the community. And I just want to give you a thanks for that. For all that you've done for him. And I appreciate that.
He's a good friend. He's a good friend, and we've been through war together.
All right, here we go. was Virginia from Ringgold?
You want to tell her where Virginia was from?
Ross,
Rossville.
Rossville. Something's tickling you. What is your memory there?
well, we was married 31 years. I was a good husband. She wanted to stay with me at home.
Now, maybe for the first time, I'm going to have you reveal some domestic violence that happened. Do you remember when you complained about her cooking, what she did?
She didn't quite get it done.
I know what happened to the cooking, but what did she do when you complained about it?
She started punching me in the stomach. I come around behind her and held her where she could punch me.
All right, here we go.
I just have a suggestion on your next book. It might be the Marsh case.
Well, let me just tell you, there could not be another story that is more personal to me than this one, and that's why this one had to be written. And I need some time with this one for a while. It's got such a great launch, and let me tell you, Savannah, Georgia, had a bit of an industry around Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And I want the Ringgold Downtown Partners to get ready for the true crime tourism that happens if a book is famous or a movie is made.
Well, and you know what? What I was reading about, the film industry in Georgia is booming, but Georgia is tired of these film companies just putting a peach at the end in the credits to say, yeah, it was filmed in Georgia. They want to start using production companies in this area. You are so right. You are right on it. This whole thing could be filmed right here. You don't have to recreate anything in Hollywood. This story has got to be sold.
Well, your reviews can help make that happen.
Hey, the young people, y'all, this was fantastic. Is there a question from a young person?
Let me just tell you that I'm going to get.
What?
Sorry, I don't need a microphone, but I have a question.
I was right back here asking, and now all of a
Sorry, I
sudden.
got nervous. I have a question.
Come on closer. Come closer.
Okay. Now it's real personal. I was just gonna stay back there. Yes, I have a question. I would like to know what was the most satisfying or rewarding part as your journey as just an old country lawyer, now turned novelist, who I am so proud of.
That's my daughter.
What? You gotta come up here.
Alina.
Alina, you gotta come up here. What?
I mentioned my children at the end of the book. I was.
Congrats, Morty! Of course! Congratulations! You're a star! You're a star!
I'm 81 years old. I never have hit a woman all my life. My mom they told me better.
I know that.
You know what? After hearing your daughter, my favorite saying in the entire world is no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. And I think what you have done for that man and what he has done for you.
Oh yeah,
You know what?
goes both
You
ways.
have lived. This is what it's all about.
Okay, I think that there's something special, Alvin, for you that's about to happen. You said you're 81 years old. You might have been lying a little about your age, right?
I'll be 82 in March.
What day of March?
March the 3rd.
Okay, this is the 21st.
Can we sing a little early?
Look at this.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear
tradition is, Alvin, you make a wish, and then you don't have to tell it, but then you will.
Hey, I know everybody wants to, I mean, we could be here all night, but I'm just so proud of you. Alvin, I cannot believe I woke up this morning so excited. I said, I'm going to meet Alvin Ridley. And who called me? Who was the young person that left the message? Thank you. That you don't know how much you have honored me when you asked me if I would do this. So thank you very much. I'm going to continue to mention it like every day on talk radio. So we're going to sell you out here. Hey, listen, you're not going to believe this. Look at that. There's somebody bought like 5 or 6 copies.
Oh my God.
It's amazing. It is. Where's that table back there?
Well,
somebody bought like 6 copies. It's amazing.
And let me say something about a Fern and a Feather general store. Jacqueline, I was going crazy because I thought, how can I get a bookseller to come to Ringgold? And Jacqueline said, well, I bought that Dolly Parton book at Fern and Feather. So I went and talked to Babs, and she said, yes, I can get the books and I can carry the books. And she has done that for Ringgold. Now, Ringgold, you can go buy a book in Ringgold. How many?
Is the owner here?
Babs here, yeah. And I'll tell you what, something else she did today, because none of us had an idea that there would be this many people here. And a lot of people got your books from other sources and brought them tonight. That is wonderful. But another thing she did was we all underestimated this event. She went and bought Barnes & Noble's stock. So you have pretty much every book right now in the Chattanooga area. But guess what? The publisher is seeing this and they're going to say, we need to reprint.
Hey, how many did you sell?
I think about 50 tonight.
Wow, that's
Oh my
fantastic.
But lots all week.
Do what?
Lots all week, but we sold out, and you're welcome to order it, and we'll have more in tomorrow.
So I'm going to mention it tomorrow on the air. So what's the name of the bookstore again?
A Fern and a Feather general store.
Oh, that'll be easy to remember. All right. All right, so where are they going to be signing? Okay.
So, if you want to order a book, you're going to go to this back table back here.
Raise your hand.
Fern and a Feather, that's the table to go pre-order. We are going to bring a table from the back up here. We are going to start the line on this side. Sanitize your hands, please. They will sign your book, and then we'll exit this way.
Well, it's mainly because we have an 82-year-old man up here, and we
Absolutely.
want